my life will never shift. I'ma keep my prayers up so my feet will never slip. Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. The way that I'm living, I'm knowing that it's alright. Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. I'm just trying to keep my head up and just learn to survive. Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. The way that I'm living, I'm knowing that it's alright. Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. I'm just trying to keep my head up and just learn to survive. Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? I'm just trying to live my life and watch the sun come up. I'm just happy I'm allowed to see my babies grow. Got me feeling so good, got me feeling alright. What am I gonna do? I'ma fly so high. What am I gonna do? I'ma keep my head high. What am I gonna do? Gotta learn to stay alive, keep the demons away. I pray, I'ma be okay. Every day, ain't nobody gonna tell me how to live my life. I'm just trying to live it right with no regrets. So you gotta hold on and stay so strong. So you gotta hold on and stay so strong. Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. The way that I'm living, I'm knowing that it's alright. Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. I'm just trying to keep my head up and just learn to survive. Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. The way that I'm living, I'm knowing that it's alright. Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. I'm just trying to keep my head up and just learn to survive. Every day I'm always thinking about the things in my life. What am I gonna do?
Welcome to Moccasin Tracks, the Marks family. Hey, you guys. All right. You know, we read a little bit about you. We found it on the Red Hawk Talent Management website, but it would be really cool if you maybe introduce each other a little bit.
Certainly. So she na ado na kaida na bashes chin kitla chini da she ado ashi da shanala. Tonahali da na sha kwa kintlana da shagan. My name is Daryl Marks. I'm Whitehorn, Zuni, Edgewater, born for those going home. My maternal grandparents are Red House, paternal grandparents are Salt. I'm from the community of Tunalia, but I currently reside here in Flagstaff. And this is my son, Machias.
Machias,
So real
welcome.
quick, hi. Real quick, yeah, that's it. On the Nishan Tabaham, but she's Jink Ashi, that's J Auto, Naka, and that's another. She am a Kai Smarks in the chat. What I said there was greetings. I am near the water, born for Edgewater. My mother's father is the People's Coming Home. My father's father is. Oh wait, no, I messed that up. Sorry. So that's translating it from English to Navajo and then Navajo to English. I get confused sometimes. What I said there was that I am near the water, born for Edgewater. My mother's father is Red Bottoms people, and my father's father is the People's Coming Home. And my name is Machias Marks. And the way that we introduce ourselves is this is our ancestors. This is the women of our community, and this is who we are and what it means to be a human being from where we're from. And we extend that invitation to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, my name is Deb Rigger, and I'm living in so-called Vermont these days with parents of settlers, and I'm very honored to be able to talk to you and share this recording with our listening audience. And I want to introduce you to my co-host, Rick Hunt.
Hello. I am a visual artist and co-host here on Moccasin Tracks. I have a Benaki background, Montagnais, and a whole bunch of other people.
Well, it's a pleasure meeting you this way.
Yes.
One day we'll meet in person.
Yeah.
That would be great.
That would be great. You know, I really love the activities that you participate in. And, you know, you sent me a little note last night that I just want our listeners to know that not only do you work with youth and in schools and in a lot of the social justice issues, but you ran for government. You ran for the school board and also tribal council. Could you just talk about that experience a little bit? Machias, maybe you could start.
Yeah.
Oh, dang. I was hoping the older one here would start so that I could think of something really cool when he says something. I'm like, oh, yeah, I should see that too. But I guess he'll do that now. I know the reason why we both ran for a political position, a government position, wasn't necessarily to be elected. Like, that wasn't the goal. The whole goal behind both of us running, and I know for myself personally, it was to give a chance in a time of our community during the pandemic to come together and begin to have these conversations about, for me, it was school board. It was talking about how we want to approach our education, and how we envision ourselves being a part of making those choices that will impact not only how we educate one another, not only how we educate the youth, but how we involve the youth and involve our community into education in the field of education. So that can mean a lot of things, because people, especially Indigenous people, understand how education is not something that's treated as like separate from everything, but treated as interconnected with everything. So when we're having those conversations, especially during the time of the pandemic, it gave us a great opportunity to say, like, hey, look, I'm an Indigenous person, or hey, look, this is a person of color, this is Black person, a Spanish-speaking person, a person that has disabilities, and we're all here at the table having this conversation. What do we want to talk about? What do we want to hear? What do we want to bring to the table, so that we know that, like, yeah, what you're talking about, it may not talk about the teacher's salary or childcare, but it's talking about something that's impacting you, whether that be your approach to education from a cultural perspective, or even bringing in your historical background, so that we involve you in your community in how we educate and how we are bringing up the youth, who are the future. We are helping. We're not helping. We are taking part in our responsibility for that future, whatever it looks like. And my father here will probably speak to something similar for the reason why he ran for tribal council, right?
So one of the things I hope we're hearing from what Machias is sharing is that oftentimes we are brought up in our own communities to say that leadership is something that we have to aspire for, right? That the teachings that are given to us, you're supposed to carry that forward and pass it along. One of the things that I marvel at with Machias is that when he was in high school, he took on that sense of like, okay, I'm gaining new knowledge, I'm gaining this understanding, now I need to apply it. Now I need to go out and act for and on behalf of and in response to his community, his younger community of youth, and the people who were surrounding him. And when he was asked to consider running for school board, that was one of those opportunities that he saw as, like, leadership isn't something that they're like, oh, I'm going to go get elected, now I'm the boss, right? It was the way that he was brought up to understand it, is that when you're asked to step into leadership, that's because somebody sees leadership qualities in you. Mm-hmm. Now you step into that role to be a representative of that community and to carry forth what they want you to lead with. And so Machias did just that, and ran in a interesting election cycle that was, like he said, held during the pandemic and at the height of the pandemic. And so everything that he had to, I guess, work through was unique in its own way. Mm-hmm. The messaging that he had to put out wasn't like a campaign or a platform. It was just like, this is who I am and this is what I represent. Here's what I'm hearing from the community, and here's what I want to amplify and carry that message forward. And so, you know, when I ran for tribal council, it was similar in the way that I understood what my community was asking for. They wanted representative leadership. They wanted to bring voice to things that needed to be voiced, addressed, worked through. And so what we've continued to try to do is bring voice to our community's needs. Not to say that, oh, here's the great and wise Machias Marks, right? Or here's this other person, Gerald Marks, and he wants to do all of these things. It's, what are we hearing our community say they need? Mm-hmm. What is been expressed as the things left unsaid or unaddressed? And how can we help with our voice, our breath, our energy to kind of carry that up and amplify that? Who are the people that we need to bring along with us that need that support or need that advocacy, brought to a higher platform? And so, you know, we do a lot of work within our own communities. We do a lot of work with younger people. We engage as much as we can with our elders in our community to hear what it is they want to do, hear what it is they want to have done and organized or amplified or voiced. And then we try to use the platforms that we have to do just that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, you know, one of the things that I continue to marvel at with Machias is he's got such a good way of speaking to people. He's poetic and articulate. And when he ran, he wasn't having to go door to door and knock on people's door. It was just people knew who he was as a young person. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the social media videos that he put out to share, like, hey, this is why I'm running, carried many votes. Like, I brag about it with him specifically. Like, hey, you got more votes than the mayor did, right? You got twice as many votes as the mayor did. You could have ran for mayor and probably won. But, you know, like, those are the fun things that we get to say. And I give him all the credit for just defining his character and who he is. And that's informed by his elders, that's supported by his peers, and that's guided by his cultural upbringing, mm-hmm. right? Everything that you see as you see him, as you see us, like the headband or hair, the jewelry, everything that is all culturally like responsive. You know, that's Machias as a young man, as when he was going through his puberty as a young boy. It was his elders that informed him of like why we dress, why we wear, why we speak, and why we conduct ourselves in a certain way. And rather than just take it in, like, okay, I've heard that, he embodied all of that. And his brother did the same thing. And that informed me as a parent, like, okay, well, I better shift gears, and this is where I need to find myself. And so I tried my best to not only emulate the teachings that they were in educating themselves with, but also to reflect the elders of our community and what their roles and how they presented themselves. And so my youngest says it best. He's like, I don't need to dress up to be Navajo or Diné. This is just who I am. And I don't want to dress up to be like a white guy. So I need to reflect my culture. And so that's been kind of like the guiding principle for us for the last probably 15 years.
And real quickly, my father was running for tribal council. He was coming from a higher Western education point of view. So when he came into his community, he had a suit and tie, his hair was slicked back. And he probably had like pieces of jewelry just like to identify, like, hey, I'm coming from here. But an elder came up to him and said, like, who are you? And my dad responded like, oh, I'm Daryl, right? I just live over the hill. My mom's from here. And I'm running for tribal council. I'm here to, represent you. And the elder like looked at him like, no, you're doing it all wrong. Like, you don't even look like us. Like, that's not who we are. That's not how our leaders look like. And then she told him like, this is how our leaders look like. And basically laid out how my father looks like now.
Wow.
The jewelry,
Beautiful.
and the hair tied up in a bun, the headband. Like, if you're going to represent us, you got to reflect us.
Yeah.
And so my father took that in. And when he brought that back home and he started showing up that way, I know that influenced me as I was going to school. Like, if I'm going to learn from people and learn in a way that honors and reflects my elders, reflects my ancestors, then I got to look the way. I can't just go up halfway like today's Navajo Day and dress up for that one day. Because every day this is me. Every day this is him. Every day this is who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that has informed us to like, hey, this is what you do. So you can choose to step up, or you can choose, like that elder said, step aside.
Oh, that's great.
Carol, I have to say that you have sons that you can certainly be proud of, and I would even say look up to.
I do every day.
Yeah, I
very
understand
blessed.
that, being a parent myself.
Mm-hmm. One of the issues that I know you're working on is bringing back Indigenous names for places. Maybe they be sacred sites, or the places where you live and where people work or gather medicines. Could you talk about the importance of that for you and your community?
For us as Navajo people, right here in this area of Flagstaff, there's a mountain that's commonly known as the San Francisco Peaks. For Navajo people, it's Doko'oslid, and it roughly translates to like shimmering mountaintop, right? Because of the snow. And growing up, my grandmother always referred to it as Doko'oslid and told us, like, all throughout her life, she said that mountain's always had snow on it, even in the summertime. And as I got older, that changed, right? It was only during the winter that I see snow on the mountain. And so in talking with my children, as they were little, I was trying to teach them that name, Doko'oslid. And of course, it was probably a lot harder for them to understand that because Navajo wasn't spoken as frequently in the home as it was when I was growing up. And so they got to know it as San Francisco Peak. And each of the peaks on the mountain, primarily the larger 4 peaks, have different names, colonizer names, that identify them. And in the high school that Machias was going to, there was some youth that were also growing up from that same knowledge base from their own tribal communities and saying, we've only known it as Doko'oslid or as, the name in Hopi or in Wallapai or Havasupai or Apache until they moved to the school, came to the school, and then they were taught these more colonized names. And, in Navajo, we know that there's a significance to this mountain. She holds a lot of power, teachings. And these names that she has labeled right now are all male names. And that takes away from that identity. It takes away from that story or those teachings when we mislabel things, mislabel people even, right? And so the youth said, well, why don't we bring that forward? Like one of the names of the peaks that's most visible from Flagstaff, right, when we're looking north, is Agassiz Peak. And Agassiz isn't a very is not somebody that we want to celebrate, right? Because a lot of what Agassi did as an educator was teach about eugenics and teach about the differences between Black people and white people, and that white people were more superior.
Yeah, so the guy was a eugenicist, and that is like, ooh, that is a no-go. That is just evil. And then maybe don't label it as evil, because then people will see it as like an abstract thing, like it's morally wrong. But when it's really an act of colonization and dehumanization, this guy didn't come out of nowhere and decide to be evil one day. He was taught, he was brought up to not only think, to not only believe, but to act on his thoughts that came from colonization, that came from acts of genocide. And that's been happening here in not only just this country, but in as well as like countries that this country learned from. Britain, France, Spain, Portuguese.
And so the youth said, why don't we just start calling the mountain by the names that we know it, right? Restore that recognition, restore that power, restore that teaching. And so looking at how the communities all organize themselves, the Hopi people look at that one particular peak, and the name they have for it is Omaki.
And Omaki, it roughly translates to House of the Clouds. And here in the sacred Southwest, here at the base of this mountain, you see that, like, as you are paying attention to your surroundings and to your environment, that this mountain brings all these clouds from all these directions, and they gather right here, and it creates a storm. It creates the weather that gives us life, gives us water, gives us that rain, and it gives us that chance of renewal every day if we choose to partake in it. And I really think it's very intelligent. It's very representative that the name Omaki not only refers to like the House of the Clouds, but as well as like how it has brought all these people from all over the world to live here. Because originally it was the 14 tribes that lived here all together with different cultures, different languages, and different beliefs at the base of the mountain. Like for us, the base of the mountain, the area is called Kinsana. And we were taught that it means the place of many homes. And when you look at it like nowadays in modern day, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But when you think about it and understand it from an ancestral perspective, you understand like, oh, there are all these tribes, all these peoples of different tongues, different beliefs, all living together. And they made it work. They learned to live with each other.
And they came from their different homes.
They came as clouds and came here. And they became that storm that gave life and that gave that stewardship to this land, so that this place now known as Flagstaff actually can exist. Because if it weren't for the indigenous peoples then, and if it weren't for the indigenous peoples now, Flagstaff wouldn't exist on the map.
Not in the way that it is right now. And so the youth thought that it was important to give her back her name, right? The names that she's referred to as or known as by the original inhabitants of this space, of this landscape. And, you know, we refer to as Dokos lead as female because she is a provider, not only of just of like, you know, bringing all of the clouds that bring a lot of the sustenance, rain, water, trees, plants, animals, all live and exist in the same space. And so, you know, she's very powerful. She's very important to us. And the youth were the ones that came forward and said, we want to change that identification and we want to recognize her for who she is to us. And so, you know, that's been our effort, is to just recognize how important this mountain is to all people, to this region, to this area, but also being just respectful and responsible with the language and the way that we celebrate or elevate certain things, names and placements. And so the youth have been working with Forest Service, with the city government and others to either re-identify, properly identify, or establish proper identifications for different placements all around, in and out of Flagstaff, right?
Oh,
In and
beautiful.
out of this.
That's
And-
happening here too. Just to, encourage you and applaud your efforts. It is happening in so-called Vermont. A bill was passed to give all the names, as the signs need to be replaced, they will also be replaced with the original people's language, the Abnaki people. And, it seems like a little thing, you get a name here and there, but when you think of it, you're doing it in Arizona, we're doing it here in the Northeast. It's a beautiful way of, it's not just acknowledging the land, it's like acknowledging culture. And so I give thanks for your work in that way. It's beautiful. And just you talking about that excites us too, I think,
Yeah.
work here.
That's great.
Yeah, in that way. We can't, I know we're not going to cover everything. So, maybe there are things that you specifically would like our listeners to think about today. And, I know I had some questions. One was, what keeps you happy doing the work that you're doing? Because we really work on the happy thing. Because there is so much grief that we experienced during COVID, and of course we're going to experience it in life, but we need to work on the happy, because that's where I feel the creative comes from, when we're able to smile and leave the air studio and leave the radio station here smiling. So what keeps you guys happy?
Being able to do this work together, I really, as a father, am so grateful that both of my sons participate and drag me along sometimes in the work that we do. A lot of the work that we're involved in is community related, it's family related. And even just thinking about, as we said, like the pandemic and COVID and its impacts, the work that we did, I remember at the onset of COVID, that was when we were just getting started with our campaign to rename and restore the name of the peaks. And pandemic hit, schools closed, businesses shut down, and we retreated back to our own home. And it was scary. And I remember thinking, well, so fortunate that we were in a space, whether that's financially or physically, to be able to provide for ourselves. Like, we got this, we're covered. And I remember my sons saying, we have everything we need, but what about other people? What about the elder? What about other families that don't have what we got? And they were informed by culture. They were like, how can we help them? When are we going to help them? And so it was nerve-wracking to try to figure out, how do we go out and help our community, help our relatives without hurting them, right? Or exposing them and putting them in danger. And then it was just a matter of like, and then how do we do that without putting ourselves in danger or hurting ourselves in the process? So it took some time, and then we started to organize ourselves in a way, and we reached out to other communities, other folks that we knew might have resources, and said, can you spare some, masks? Can you spare some PPE of any kind, so that we can share that with our relatives that might not have the same accessibility to the internet or connections like that we have. And we really just wanted to fill in the gaps.
with the work that was being done on a mass scale. We knew that there was people that were being left out or that had fallen through the cracks. And so that led us on a journey of even like, how can we travel from here to Washington, to Seattle, Washington, to collect masks and other PPE for our unsheltered and our elder and our youth without putting ourselves in danger. And it was quite the adventure, but it was so needed as a family. It brought us closer. Mm-hmm. And you know, my sons are older, right? They've both graduated from high school by that time. And, you know, as a parent,
genuinely and like straight up, it was hard in that time because we were having to learn to like how to live with each other all the time because we were around each other all the time. And as well as we had to learn to like, again, work through that, like communicate through our struggles, communicate through our conflicts, and understand that like it's necessary, like those conflicts and those struggles, because then you're listening to each other. I remember hearing a very intelligent person talk about it, saying that it's like manure. It's not gonna be good at first. It's gonna smell bad, but it's good in the long term because then it's gonna give and nourish your relationality to one another. Oh. And we also had to process a lot of grief, as you were saying, Deb, that it was a lot. And I know for me, it took a toll on me and it impacted how I performed in school. And I know there weren't resources like in a Western setting that could speak to that could reflect and help me grow in the process of all that loss and all that hardship. Mm-hmm. I know it took going to the Dakotas, going to Seattle, and going where the land was and going to where the indigenous people were to remind me that this is who you are. You aren't Native American. You aren't the label. You aren't your grades. You are a child of the earth. And you have to remember what that means and have to see yourself in what that looks like. And I know it took a lot of prayer. It took a lot of sitting with the earth, nature, plants, animals, all of that, and sitting with people in ceremony to be reminded of that. This is what it looks like. Yeah. You carry this with you always. You don't leave it at the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your ancestors are always with you. You just have to listen.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for tuning in today to Moccasin Tracks. The Marks family is our guest today, and we're really enjoying our conversation. I don't want to run out of time, and I want to give you each, an opportunity for closing comments. So, I know that there's things on your heart that you may want to share that I haven't asked you about or that Rick hasn't commented on, but I'm sorry that we have to start closing comments already. I feel like we've just begun, and maybe we'll have you back again sometime to continue this conversation.
Well, in closing, as we're saying, Makai's talking about this connection, cultural connection. And we've talked a little bit about Doko Sleep. A lot of the work that we did in the teachings that we apply to this mountain and have in this region, that informed a lot of the work that we started, that we continue to do throughout the pandemic. Even when we received the JFK Profiles in Courage Award, the question was asked, why, right? And it's like the teachings, the mountain, that's the witness to all of this. Mm-hmm. It even to now, like the work that we're doing with the unsheltered, with the community assistance teams, or working to organize with the Indigenous Circle of Flagstaff to get the Indigenous Community Cultural Center, or even the work to like show up and do representation for our Native American communities, which are being arrested at a much higher rate than anybody else here in Flagstaff, right? With Southwest Center for Equal Justice, or even just continuing to do cultural enrichment or navigating the work that needs to continue, even with families that are still impacted by COVID through Fourth World Foundation, a nonprofit that both Machias and we started, with some other community members. Like, those things are informed by culture, informed by our ways of being. And we, as a family, take joy in being able to do that together. That's what gives us our happiness, is knowing that while we have breath, we're doing what we can, informed by and respectful and responsible to our communities, but also like knowing that all of this is kind of the expectation of our culture. That's the way that our elders kind of laid it all out for us to kind of guide ourselves. And this mountain here, she's our witness to that.
Mhm.
Our grandmother is looking down at us and saying, what are you doing while you have breath in your lungs and ability to move? And you know, that's just been the excitement of it all. Like, for me as a parent, knowing that my sons are not only jumping in and doing the work, but they're like moving it along even further than I could have imagined, challenging the norm and pushing it forward.
And I know for myself and all that work, I like to think of it as it's one of our stories that our descendants will tell. You know, because this work, it's hard. It requires a lot. It takes a lot of sacrifice, and it takes a lot of dedication and determination. But I remember the stories that my elders taught me is that the human beings have always struggled. They have always struggled to live with the land. And that's how we've learned to be human beings from wherever we come from. It's through those struggles. It's through learning through our mistakes, failures, our ignorance and our arrogance, so that we learn and become better human beings. It's not called be going, like you're gonna get there. It's all about who you become along the way. And that's always an active process. My elders, they told me, and I'm reminded of this from our Māori relatives in New Zealand, is that when they were asked the question, are you Māori? And they responded, and this elder said, no, I'm not. Even though this Māori elder was all decked out in their culture, they spoke the language, and they had the heart and spirit. It was confusing at first to hear that response. But they explained that I am not Māori until I take my last breath, when I can look back at my life, and that's when I decide, did I live my life fully as Māori? And for me, being Navajo, being Diné, it's when I take that last breath, I look back, did I live my life Diné? Did I live my life responsibly to the peoples, to the land, and to the culture that I come from? So that those who come after me can learn from my mistakes, my failures, but as well as like, hey, look, I learned this from somebody else and I want to pass that on to you. This work is hard because we're creating that new world. When Columbus came over here and got lost, he didn't think that this would happen, that all of us from all over the world would come together and say, hey, look, this is who we are and this is where we come from. Mm-hmm. Who are you? And Columbus nowadays can mean anybody who disconnects from that reality in saying that they're a human being, or in promoting hate and discrimination like Agassiz. This is who we are, and this is how we're choosing to show up for our unsheltered relatives, for the youth, and for the peoples, because this is who we are.
Oh, thank you so much, both of you, for being with us today. We just have like a minute left. Did you want to say something else, Daryl?
No, we're just grateful for the opportunity to build in community and have this conversation with you. We do look forward to opportunities to do that again.
Yes.
It's always important for us as Indigenous people to just reclaim, restate, and reorganize ourselves and hold space in the places that we call home. So we're looking forward to visiting yours.
Well, it's really an honor to have you on the show today, and I'm really grateful for your words. And we'll share this and keep it rolling out with the wind.
And I just want to say I'm very impressed with you men.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. We do what we can, and we hope we continue to do more.
And thanks for your music. We started the show off with your music, and it's really fun, you know, and I know you're both contributing to it. And I love the lyrics, and thank you so much. And we'll look forward to having you back in the future.
Yes.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll go on that. Be well.
You too.
Stay blessed.
Carolyn, you got a song for us?
Yes.
Bye.
Brought before my father, he began to speak. Learn the legends of your people, so you may defeat the evil. Show them the way and remind them to pray. Rise up to the dawn and sing the morning song. Help them break the bonds that have made them slaves. Go further inspired by the fallen chiefs. Follow these traditions, learn the old beliefs. Learn as many lessons atop of Mother Nature. Just continue to climb and to elevate your mind. Surpass the heavens, shine bright with the stars. Take this lightning in your eyes as you look up to the skies. Illuminate the dark that it is set upon all the Indian youth whose native pride is gone. Like the Kotakas who speak with two tongues. Ascend the sacred mountains of the sacred Southwest. Just take this whole conflict to another level. Partake in the fight, the warriors taken to flight. Make this whole world tremble and quake. Marks in the sand, there's too much at stake. I'll send you to your people, I'll send you as the sun. M-A-R-K-S. I'm the Native American that's truly blessed. Defending the land where my grandmother rests. Guided by the spirits, put my life to the test. M-A-R-K-S. I'm the Native American that's truly blessed. Defending the land where my grandmother rests. Guided by the spirits, put my life to the test. M-A-R-K-S.